In the hands of a British soldier, the Lee Enfield No. 4 MKM was more than steel and wood. It was the last line between civilization and collapse. The year was 1939. Europe stood on the precipice of annihilation. The Treaty of Versailles had crumbled into dust, and Adolf Hitler's Wehrmacht rolled across Poland with mechanized fury. In London, the War Office knew what was coming. They had watched the Spanish Civil War. They had seen the Blitzkrieg doctrine tested and perfected. And they understood with chilling clarity that Britain's aging arsenal would not be enough. The British Army had carried the Lee Enfield rifle since 1895, through the Boer War, through the mud-choked trenches of the Somme, through every colonial conflict that painted the map red. The SMLE, the short magazine Lee Enfield, had earned legendary status. Its 10-round magazine, its smooth bolt action, its uncanny accuracy in trained hands. British infantrymen could fire 15 aimed rounds per minute. German soldiers in the First World War often mistook this rapid fire for machine guns. But by the 1930s, the SMLE was showing its age. Military doctrine had evolved. Modern warfare demanded longer effective ranges, better accuracy at distance, and rifles that could be manufactured faster and cheaper. The clouds of war were gathering, and Britain needed a weapon that could arm millions. In 1931, the British Small Arms Committee began development of a new rifle. The goal was ambitious: retain the legendary speed and reliability of the Lee Enfield system, but modernize it for 20th century warfare. Engineers at the Royal Small Arms Factory in Enfield Lock, north of London, went to work. The design process was meticulous. The new rifle would chamber the standard .303 British cartridge, a proven round with devastating stopping power. But the designers made critical improvements. They moved the rear sight from the barrel to the receiver bridge, closer to the shooter's eye. This change, simple as it seemed, dramatically improved accuracy. The aperture sight was faster to acquire and more precise than the old blade and notch system. They redesigned the barrel: heavier, stiffer, free-floating from the forend to eliminate pressure points that affected accuracy. The new barrel configuration allowed for consistent, predictable shot placement even after sustained firing heated the metal. In the chaos of combat, when a soldier's life depended on his first shot hitting true, this mattered. The bolt was refined, stronger locking lugs, smoother action. The magazine held 10 rounds in a detachable box, though in practice British soldiers would load with stripper clips, keeping the magazine fixed to the rifle. The wood furniture was redesigned for mass production. Simpler lines, fewer machining steps. Every modification served dual purposes: improve performance and increase manufacturing speed. By 1939, the new rifle received its official designation, Rifle No. 4 MGI. The name was bureaucratic, cold, but the weapon itself was anything but. The No. 4 weighed 9 pounds unloaded, 44 inches of oiled walnut and blued steel. The bolt handle was bent down, allowing soldiers to work the action without removing the rifle from their shoulder. The trigger pull was crisp, breaking cleanly at around 5 pounds. In the hands of a trained rifleman, the Lee Enfield No. 4 could deliver accurate fire out to 600 yards. With the ladder sight extended, competent marksmen could engage targets at 1,000 yards or beyond. But Britain was running out of time. When war was declared on September 3, 1939, production of the No. 4 was just beginning. The SMLE remained the standard rifle. Enfield Lock ramped up manufacturing, but the demand was catastrophic. The British Expeditionary Force needed rifles. The Home Guard needed rifles. Commonwealth forces, Canadians, Australians, New Zealanders, Indians, South Africans, all needed rifles. The government made a desperate decision. Production would be distributed. Enfield Lock would manufacture rifles. But so would the Birmingham Small Arms Company. So would Fazakerley in Liverpool. In 1941, production began at Long Branch Arsenal in Canada. Eventually, even the Savage Arms Company in the United States would produce No. 4 rifles under contract, designated the No. 4 MKY. The factories ran day and night. Women replaced the men who had gone to fight. They operated lathes and milling machines, fitted barrels, assembled actions, test-fired every rifle that came off the line. The smell of cutting oil and gunpowder hung in the air. The work was dangerous. Machinery claimed fingers, hands, lives. But the rifles kept coming. By 1940, the number 4 was reaching frontline units. Soldiers who had trained on the SMLE found the transition natural. The manual of arms was virtually identical. The legendary speed of the Lee Enfield system remained. British infantrymen could still fire 15 rounds per minute with ease. Some could manage 25 or 30 in short bursts. The rifle's first major test came in the deserts of North Africa. The 8th Army, commanded by General Bernard Montgomery, faced Erwin Rommel's Afrika Korps across the scorched wasteland of Libya and Egypt. The fighting was brutal. Tank battles raged across the dunes. Infantry clashed in the wadis and among the rocky outcrops. And everywhere, the Lee Enfield No. 4 proved its worth. Sand and dust were the enemies of every weapon in North Africa. Rifles jammed, bolts seized. But the Lee Enfield's action, robust and simple, kept functioning. Soldiers learned to keep their rifles wrapped in cloth, to shake out the sand before loading, to oil the bolts sparingly. The No. 4's rear-mounted aperture sight stayed cleaner than the old SMLE's exposed front sight. When British riflemen engaged German and Italian infantry at range, the accuracy advantage was noticeable. Private Albert Thompson of the Royal Sussex Regiment later recalled the Battle of El Alamein in October 1942. His battalion advanced through German minefields under artillery fire. "You couldn't see 10 feet in front of you for the smoke and dust," he said. But when we got to close quarters, the Lee Enfield never failed. Fastest bolt-action rifle ever made, and German soldiers knew it. They feared our rate of fire. The No. 4 also saw action in the jungles of Burma, where British and Commonwealth forces fought the Japanese in some of the war's most nightmarish conditions. The heat was suffocating. Humidity corroded metal overnight. Insects swarmed. Disease killed more men than bullets. Yet the Lee Enfield endured. In the close-quarters fighting of jungle warfare, the rifle's length, shorter than many contemporary bolt actions, proved advantageous. The No. 4 could be fitted with a spike bayonet, turning it into a formidable close combat weapon. British and Indian troops learned to move silently through the jungle, engaging Japanese positions at point-blank range. The Lee Enfield's speed in those frantic moments often meant the difference between life and death. Lieutenant James Harrington of the 2nd Battalion, Burma Rifles, wrote in his diary about an ambush near the Irrawaddy River in March 1944. The Japanese opened fire from concealed positions. We returned fire immediately. The rapidity with which our men could work their rifles, 10 rounds gone in seconds, broke their attack. They retreated into the jungle. We counted 12 enemy dead. Our losses, 3 wounded. But it was in Europe, in the hedgerows of Normandy and the forests of the Ardennes, that the Lee Enfield No. 4 would face its ultimate trial. On June 6, 1944, British and Canadian forces stormed the beaches of Normandy as part of Operation Overlord. The landings at Sword, Juno, and Gold beaches were chaos incarnate. Men waded through chest-deep water under machine gun fire, artillery screaming overhead, bodies floating in the surf. Those who reached the beach carried Lee Enfield No. 4 rifles, the wood swollen from seawater, sand grinding in the bolts. Sergeant William Harris of the South Lancashire Regiment hit Sword Beach in the first wave. He described the moment his landing craft's ramp dropped. The noise was unimaginable. Shells, machine guns, men screaming. I came off the ramp into water up to my waist. My rifle was soaked, but I kept it above water as we'd been trained. When we reached the seawall and returned fire, the Lee Enfield worked. Water drained out. I cycled the bolt, and it fired. Can't ask for more than that. In the weeks following D-Day, British forces fought through the Norman bocage, ancient hedgerows that created natural fortresses for German defenders. Every field was a potential killing ground. Every hedgerow concealed enemy positions. The fighting was intimate and deadly. Battles were measured in yards, not miles. The Lee Enfield No. 4 WWII did not win the war alone, but it armed the men who did. Through the autumn of 1944, British and Canadian forces pushed through France and Belgium toward the German frontier. The euphoria of liberation gave way to grinding attrition. The Wehrmacht, though retreating, fought with desperate ferocity. Every town, every river crossing, every forest became a battlefield. And in those battles, the Lee Enfield proved itself again and again. The rifle's rate of fire remained its defining characteristic. German soldiers, armed with the excellent but slower Karabiner 98K, found themselves outmatched in rapid exchanges. A British section, 10 men, could put down 150 rounds per minute with their Lee Enfields. Combined with the Bren light machine gun, this firepower was devastating. Corporal Edward Clark of the Royal Berkshire Regiment described a firefight near the Belgian town of Overloon in October 1944. "We were advancing through open ground when German infantry opened up from a tree line. We went to ground and returned fire. The speed of our rifles, 10 rounds, reload, 10 more, it kept their heads down. We could suppress them while our Bren gunner flanked their position. That's how we fought. Fast, coordinated, relentless." The winter of 1944-45 brought Operation Market Garden, the failed airborne assault to capture bridges in the Netherlands, and the Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's last major offensive in the West. British forces fought in the Ardennes forest under conditions that tested every weapon system. Temperatures plunged below zero. Snow and ice covered everything. Men's fingers went numb. Rifle bolts froze. The Lee Enfield's robust design saved lives. Soldiers learned to keep their rifles under their coats when not in use, using body heat to prevent the actions from freezing. The rifle's simple mechanism, fewer parts than many contemporary designs, meant fewer failure points. Even when ice formed on the bolt, a sharp rap would break it free. The rifle kept firing. Private Robert MacDonald of the Seaforth Highlanders spent 3 days in a frozen foxhole near Bastogne in December 1944. "I watched American soldiers struggling with their M1 Garands in the cold," he recalled. "The gas systems would freeze, malfunction. Our Lee Enfields, we just worked the bolt. Primitive maybe, but it never let us down. When German infantry came at us through the snow, our rifles fired." That's what mattered. As the Allies crossed the Rhine in March 1945 and pushed into Germany itself, the nature of the fighting changed. Urban warfare in ruined cities, close-quarters combat in buildings and cellars. The Lee Enfield adapted. Its length, while longer than submachine guns, was manageable in tight spaces. The rifle could be fitted with a No. 4 spike bayonet, a cruciform blade designed to puncture but difficult to remove, a weapon of pure lethality. British troops fighting through the shattered streets of German cities found the Lee Enfield's versatility essential. At distance, it remained accurate. In close quarters, it was fast enough to compete with automatic weapons through sheer rate of fire. And when ammunition ran low, the bayonet turned the rifle into a spear. By May 8, 1945, when Germany surrendered, the Lee Enfield No. 4 MK1 had become the standard rifle of the British Commonwealth forces. Over 4 million had been produced. They had fought in every theater of the war, from the Arctic convoys to the Pacific Islands, from the deserts of North Africa to the streets of Berlin. But the rifle's story did not end with victory in Europe. When the atomic bombs fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945, ending the war in the Pacific, British forces still carried Lee Enfields. The rifle had proven so reliable, so effective, that there was no rush to replace it. While other nations developed semi-automatic rifles, Britain kept faith with the bolt-action Lee Enfield. The decision was pragmatic. The No. 4 was cheaper to manufacture than semi-automatic designs. It was more reliable in adverse conditions. It required less maintenance. And in the hands of trained soldiers, its rate of fire approached that of semi-automatic rifles anyway. The British philosophy emphasized marksmanship over firepower. Every shot counted. The Lee Enfield No. 4 served through the conflicts that followed World War II. British soldiers carried them in Malaya, fighting communist insurgents in the jungle. They used them in Korea, where bitter cold tested weapons to their limits. They carried them during the Suez Crisis, in Cyprus, in Kenya, during the Mau Mau uprising. The rifle that had armed Britain against Hitler continued to serve the empire as it slowly dissolved. In 1954, a refined version appeared. The number 4 Mk2, stronger steel, improved trigger mechanism, better sights. But the fundamental design remained unchanged. The rifle that had been rushed into production in 1939 needed no radical improvements. It worked. The Lee Enfield finally began to be phased out in 1957, when the British Army adopted the L1A1 self-loading rifle, a semi-automatic weapon firing the 7.62mm NATO cartridge. But the transition was slow. Many units kept their Lee Enfields well into the 1960s. Reserve and territorial units carried them into the 1970s. And in some Commonwealth nations, the rifle served even longer. The Canadian Rangers who patrol the Arctic used Lee Enfield No. 4 rifles until 2015, 76 years after the design was adopted. The rifle's reliability in extreme cold, its simplicity, and its power against polar bears made it irreplaceable. When the Rangers finally transitioned to a modern bolt-action rifle, many expressed reluctance to give up their Lee Enfields. The rifle's influence extended beyond military service. After World War II, millions of surplus Lee Enfield No. 4 rifles flooded the civilian market. They became hunting rifles, target rifles, historical collectibles. Competitive shooters discovered that the smooth action and accuracy made the No. 4 excellent for long-range competitions. Even today, Lee Enfield rifles compete in vintage military rifle matches worldwide. The design influenced firearms development for decades. The rear-mounted aperture sight became standard on military rifles. The detachable box magazine influenced future weapon systems. The emphasis on rate of fire from a bolt-action rifle pushed other nations to develop semi-automatic designs faster. The Lee Enfield forced evolution. But beyond specifications and service records, beyond production numbers and technical innovations, the Lee Enfield No. 4 MKY represented something deeper. It was the rifle that armed ordinary men during civilization's darkest hour. Farm boys from Yorkshire, clerks from London, miners from Wales, men who never wanted to be soldiers but who answered the call anyway. They trained with the Lee Enfield, learned its weight and balance, memorized its manual of arms. They carried it across beaches and through deserts, through forests and into cities. They cleaned it in freezing foxholes and humid jungles. They trusted it with their lives. And more often than not, the rifle rewarded that trust. Veterans who carried the No. 4 speak of it with a respect reserved for few objects. Not affection exactly. It was too heavy for that, too utilitarian. But respect. Recognition. The rifle was a tool that did what it was designed to do when it mattered most, without drama or failure. Private Thomas Williams of the Durham Light Infantry, who carried his Lee Enfield from Normandy to the Baltic, said it simply, "It was a good rifle. Heavy, yes, simple, yes, but it fired when you pulled the trigger, and it hit what you aimed at. In war, that's everything." The Lee Enfield No. 4 I now rests in museums and private collections, a relic of a world that destroyed itself and then rebuilt. The rifle outlasted the empire it served. It outlasted most of the men who carried it. But its legacy endures in every modern military rifle, in every doctrine of infantry tactics, in every lesson learned about what makes a weapon truly effective. It was not the most advanced rifle of World War II. It was not the most powerful, nor the most accurate at extreme range, but it was reliable. It was fast. It was there when it was needed. And in the end, that was enough. The rifle that armed Britain in its finest hour stands as testament to a simple truth. In war, perfection matters less than dependability, innovation less than execution, and complexity less than the courage of the men who pull the trigger. 9 pounds of wood and steel, 10 rounds in the magazine, bolt action smooth as silk and twice as deadly. The Lee Enfield No. 4 MKY. I was not just a weapon. It was the sound of democracy defending itself, the weight of duty shouldered by millions, the cold metal promise that tyranny would not stand. When the last veteran who carried a Lee Enfield in anger finally passes, the rifle will remain. In collections and on ranges, in history books and documentary films. a reminder of what ordinary people can accomplish when armed with good tools, clear purpose, and the will to endure. The echo of battle fades, but the rifle remembers. End.